Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Geraghty of National Review. Three martinis coming up.
So glad you're with us for the Monday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Jim Geraghty is back. And on any other day, that would probably be the banner headline just about anywhere in the world. Jim, it is so good to have you back. We are very grateful to Andy McCarthy and Scott Bertram and John Gabriel and Ez Stepman, Rob Long, everybody who's kind of chipped in over the past couple of weeks. But great to have you back.
I was going to say, this morning's top headline, I'm still on this podcast. I understand people had doubts about it. We had our pre-taped Friday one. Irving Schmidlap can call off the search. It was kind of funny. I think he wanted to do this series of each day, kind of a Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, looking for me. And that prompted me to talk a little about where I actually was, visiting my parents for the early part of the week. Second part of the week, first robotic competition, basically the World Championship for high school robotics. Had a ton of fun. No, I don't understand it. Both my kids do way better than I do. I can't get the remote control to work. But they had room for a dad who could, drive them there. And I did find that it's true that actually Houston is it's only an hour away from Houston. And could bring snacks. And at one point, they needed me to carry a plank. There's a good chunk of the high school there's a lot more woodworking involved in robotics construction than you'd think. I guess the idea is to make the robots biodegradable or something like that. We did really well, 6-4 against competition of the best robots in the world, held back a little bit by termites. But beyond that, it was a really great competition. So, I had a great time, great kids. And if you ever feel like the kids are getting screwed up, conservatives tend to be curmudgeonly. These kids today. Go to this event or your local high school robotics competition where you will see kids who, and I love my kids dearly, they're nerds. There's no two ways around it. But they are happy, thriving, enthusiastic nerds, and they get together at this. And all the other kids at the other competition, they're nerds too, and they just get to be themselves. And there's no things have changed since the Generation X rolled out. Where based on thanks to movies stuff like that. If you were a nerd, the idea was to flush your head in the toilet and stuff you in a locker and all that stuff. As soon as Bill Gates became the world's richest man, people realized nerds run the world. Being a nerd is using your mind is a great way to get ahead in this world. They're full of energy and enthusiasm, bright futures. So it's great to see.
Excellent. Well, in any other day, Jim Geraghty being back would easily be the headline that circles the globe. But today, it's the passing of Pope Francis, which we'll get to in just a moment. But first, we need to tell you about BetterHelp. And today, our podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. And therapy can feel like a big investment, but you need to take care of your mind just as much as you take care of your physical body. So one of the big hurdles in this is the cost, because medical expenses normally are plenty on their own. But then when it comes to regular therapy, that can really add up, because oftentimes it's $100 to $250 per session. But with BetterHelp Online Therapy, you can save on average of up to 50% per session.
With more than 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, which has served more than 5 million people all around the world. And it's convenient. You can join a session with the click of a button, helping you fit therapy into your busy life. And you can switch therapists at any time.
They ask you a bunch of questions. They fit you with the right therapist for some of the things that you want to be talking about. But if it doesn't work out, they go back to that and they find another therapist for you. 30,000 therapists that are in that network. So your well-being is worth it. Visit betterhelp.com/3ML to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/3ML. All right, Jim, I like the way you put it in the morning jolt today, that this couldn't possibly come as a huge surprise, given that Pope Francis was in the hospital for 5 weeks, had a very complicated case of pneumonia, but he got out of the hospital and he was there at Easter yesterday, not looking particularly great, obviously, but nonetheless, he was able to speak.
Cari fratelli e sorelle, buona Pasqua.
Brothers and sisters, happy Easter, he said. But we get the news this morning, most of us waking up to it, that Pope Francis has died at the age of 88. He had been Pope for roughly 12 years since Benedict uncharacteristically resigned in 2013. Almost 20 years, 20 years to the month since Pope John Paul II died. And Jim, this is a papacy that's going to be discussed and written about and studied for a long time. as you point out, there's folks on the left who were disappointed they didn't do more about female ordination or definition of marriage and that sort of thing. Those on the right would point out that he gave statements that were cryptic and could be interpreted as getting softer on those things. Actually, back in 2015, I named him the most overrated political figure because he came to the United States and talked mostly about climate change and redistribution of wealth when there was a genocide of Christians happening at the hands of ISIS. And so there's going to be a lot of different things said about him. I think most people deeply admired the fact that he considered himself not this regal figure, but somebody who could touch and spend time with the poor and the disabled, and just somebody who wanted to include everyone. So we'll see what happens next with the College of Cardinals and all that. But what's your reaction to the news this morning?
As I said, something that was simultaneously expected and a shock. The front page of today's Wall Street Journal has a picture of Pope Francis in the Pope Mobile in St. Peter's, taken yesterday after Easter services. And then we wake up this morning to the news that he's dead. But by the way, every news editor has this nightmare of you put something out, it's on front page, the newspaper starts, getting thrown out to people, and then the news changes very dramatically, and what you have there is outdated. A complicated pope here, and I think during one of his earlier controversies, I went back and I checked, and I wrote something like, the Catholic Church and I think Christianity in general isn't meant to conveniently fit with every aspect of a particular American political party. The Catholic Church has traditionally has always been very pro-life, has traditionally been opposed to gay marriage, and has always kind of stood for traditional values in the family, which generally puts it at odds with the Democratic Party and its modern form. However, the Catholic Church is a very open to migration of almost all kinds, tells us to welcome in the traveler, and that has always run afoul of generally the attitudes on the right regarding immigration, illegal immigration, and asylum, and entering a country illegally. Turn the other cheek, as much as Christ has told us, is a very tough thing to enact in foreign policy, and national defense, national security policy. So there's always going to be certain, and I remember at one point, I believe it was earlier this year, where Pope Francis urged the Ukrainians to forgive Russians for invading their country, and I can't say I think that was particularly astute guidance at that moment. Nobody's interested in forgiveness. The shooting is still going on. So that's, but the church is never meant to fit in with this. And one of the angles that, somebody dies, you've got years of leadership of the church to analyze. The one I focused on, just because I think it was just so glaring, was how much the image of Pope Francis in the United States was shaped by the liberal media that saw what it wanted to see in him. And I think it's very fair to say that he would often make a statement. He did quite a few interviews with secular media. And then the comment, which he was speaking off the cuff, would be taken as a doctrinal declaration. And you get these giant screaming headlines. And then afterwards, the Vatican say, whoa, no, that's not what he meant. It's being misinterpreted. It's being mistranslated. In some cases, there were translation issues. I also think there was very much a desire on the part of the American media. I don't know how many people are fans of the Kevin Smith film Dogma. Some would find it, certainly irreverent. Some might call it blasphemous, but has this idea of this concept of the buddy Christ. This, cheerful, advertising style version of Jesus, the no hard edges, no hard teachings, soft general version of that. And I think there were a lot of people who wanted Pope Francis to be the buddy Christ of popes, to be exactly a pope who would be completely in line with the party platform of the Democratic National Committee. That was not really who he was in certain ways. He always remained pro-life. He said he would bless people in gay marriages, but not the marriages themselves, a distinction that I think a lot of folks in the U.S. media, either they ignored or they didn't pay too close attention to, or they kind of willfully ignored it. They didn't like to acknowledge that kind of point. It was always kind of fun when Francis would say something pro-life and kind of disrupt this happy narrative about him. So I don't know if he was necessarily as progressive as the coverage of him in the U.S. media would suggest, but I'll let other folks make those arguments. He will be missed, and I think we know. Also, this is the greatest publicity stunt for the film Conclave ever. I'm sure they're going to be, touted, but I fear the number of people who will look to that as documentary evidence of how this process plays out. It's not how it plays out. Ask any Catholic. That's very rarely do you have terrorist bombings and all of that kind of stuff going on there. So, spoiler alert if you hadn't seen it, but you don't want to go see it. It's not a good movie. Anyway, this is a turning point in the church. I think it'll be my understanding is kind of a wide open sense of who could be the next pope. They'll be gathering in Rome, and I think all eyes will be on the Vatican for the next week, 2 weeks, could be quite a while until we see white smoke again.
Exactly. Yeah, just a couple of thoughts that come to mind a little bit in response to what you said. I think sometimes he wanted to be a little bit cryptic.
If he wanted to speak clearer, he could have.
He could have, yeah. So he's like, the church needs a greater dialogue with Marxists. Well, if you want to tell them the gospel, yes. If you want to have reach common ground with the Marxists on some of their things, I don't think so. Because one of the big things about Marxism, they don't believe in God. Also, I just want to point out that despite what's being said on social media, we're pretty sure that J.D. Vance, even though he met with the Pope yesterday, is not responsible for the Pope's passing. So.
Yes. Yeah. No, whenever a Pope dies, there's automatically conspiracy theories. Because there's no way that a man who was 88 could possibly have died of who just had, double pneumonia. Couldn't be natural causes. There's got to be something sinister going on here. 88-year-olds don't just drop dead like that. And of course, meeting J.D. Vance, I'm sure the conspiracy theories are now working overtime that there's some, sinister Ohio Freemasons are at work or something like that. Dan Brown is working on his next novel.
The other thing, I think, Jim, we're just of the certain age where this process is still fascinating because we were well into adulthood the first time we consciously were aware of the Pope passing, which had been John Paul II in 2005. I mean, he had been there for over a quarter of a century. I don't think you and I had remembered 1978 when Paul VI died, and then John Paul I died after just a month in the papacy. And so that whole process played out. And then we had a resignation, which is very uncommon for hundreds and hundreds of years. And here we are again. So we'll see what happens next.
One of my colleagues had asked, what is the National Review coverage of conclaves like? And I was overseas for the last one. Or for one of them. So we don't have a lot of precedent. It's been a while. So, we'll see.
In just a moment, we'll be talking about the story of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. But one of the issues that's been crazy here, Jim, is just the media coverage of this. It's been so binary. And a place like Ground News can really help you sift between left and right and figure out what's actually going on here. What they do is they don't have their own stories. They tell you what the left and what the right are saying. For example, on the right, one of the outlets says, Senator Van Hollen dodges whether Abrego Garcia was a gang member. On the left, 2 examples of courage in the face of American tyranny. And obviously, Chris Van Hollen is a hero. So, Jim, there's a wide variety of perspectives. And regardless of where you land on the spectrum, it's good to know what different sides are thinking.
Ground News is a platform that makes it easy to compare news sources, read between the lines of media bias, and break free from the algorithms. Unlike the mainstream narrative coming from the news sources you're used to, Ground News puts you in a position to choose and compare the news you want to read while giving you a peek into what's being reported on the other side of the political spectrum.
Visit groundnews.com/martini today to get 40% off the Ground News Vantage plan and get access to all of their news analysis features. That's groundnews.com/martini for 40% off the Ground News Vantage plan for a limited time only. All right, Jim, on to our second martini now, and this is kind of a crazy martini. House Democrats, Politico says, will travel to El Salvador to secure Maryland man's return. Maryland man has become the mainstream media's basic description for Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And of course, we've seen Chris Van Hollen, who I just talked about, coming back from El Salvador. He was down there kind of twiddling his thumbs there for a day or so before he was even allowed to meet with Garcia. And now, of course, the drumbeat continues with these members from the House of Representatives, which I'm pretty sure none of them are actually from Maryland. Robert Garcia of California, I assume no relation, but Maxwell Frost of Florida, Yasamin Ansari of Arizona, and Maxine Dexter of Oregon are all planning to make the trip. And so, Jim, obviously they're looking for their 15 minutes of fame, but you also wrote about this in the Morning Jolt today, that there's a real simple way to dispose of this case and end this stalemate and move on to other things.
I just want to check, Maryland dad is the new phrase that is applied to him in every circumstance. The same way that lifelong stutterer was always applied to Joe Biden, and austere religious scholar was applied to al-Baghdadi. It's fascinating what labels get stuck to particular figures in circumstances like this. So, I mean, look, I was away all of last week when this really blew up, and let's begin by saying the Trump administration should be thanking its lucky star that the Democrats have decided to make this their crusade du jour and not the economy. Still some, really ominous numbers coming out on that front. So, by the way, is it you have, out of deference to the upper chamber that the senators get to visit the guy in El Salvador first and then members of the House do? Or it's just that, they got to the travel agent first to book the flights on Expedia to get down there faster? I know. Yeah, they've just decided this is the hill they want to die on, that this is the cause that they want to do. Now, I walked through it in today's Morning Jolt, and I'm like, look, first of all, the administration said that he was put onto this plane and sent to El Salvador in an, quote, administrative error, unquote. The government should not be deporting anyone based on administrative errors. And I think that if you do not, when you do that, you're obligated to bring him back, even if he should be ending up right back in the same place over in El Salvador. Secondly, there was a court order saying he was not to be deported. You and I might look at that and say that's a nonsensical court order. It was a poorly justified or poorly thought out. ICE had an opportunity to appeal that decision, and they did not way back in 2019. So I think that's you could point to the administration dropping the ball. But the administration, the executive branch of government, cannot just ignore court orders when it doesn't like them. And that's why I believe you got to bring him back. Having said that, entirely separate to whether you think he's a gang member. And by the way, I don't like the idea that wearing Chicago Bulls paraphernalia by itself would be representative of being as evidence of gang membership. You may recall this guy by the name of Michael Jordan kind of made them pretty popular. Just coincidentally, heaven for... Look, I think we both kind of are feeling... You and I can breathe easily, Greg, because no self-respecting gang is ever going to put on Bears paraphernalia or the Jets.
I have Bulls paraphernalia, baby. I still have the Bulls' first three-peat t-shirt.
And that's why, dear listeners, you've always long suspected Greg Corombos was affiliated with MS-13. No, but I don't know if this guy's a gang member or not. Having said that, I think it's kind of irrelevant to this because he entered the country illegally. If you're going to claim asylum, you're supposed to do it within 1 year of arrival. He waited 8 years. It wasn't close. It wasn't like, he just barely missed the deadline or something like that. They allow you to give you extensions if there's, extraordinary circumstances. No mention of extraordinary circumstances. But he said because of fear of this other gang that he was allowed to stay in the country. Well, there's been a huge crackdown on gangs down there in El Salvador. The threat has passed. And also beyond that, there's also the matter of the restraining order his wife took out on him. Various other things. They say he's never been charged with a crime. Well, okay, they let him off on a warning for a bunch of this stuff. But the other thing is, look, you are not in the country legally. The threat to we said, okay, we're going to grant you not full asylum, but a temporary authorization to stay in the country. We bring him back, remove that, send him back through proper channels. And people might say, well, if you're going to send him back to El Salvador, why do you have to bring him back? Because the law matters. Because doing things properly matters. And if you want to legitimize everything that is being done with the deportation of dangerous criminals in this country, you have to follow the law. You can't just say, close enough. That's not the right attitude for law enforcement. Horseshoes and hand grenades are the only things where close enough counts. So, bring him back. Send it back to El Salvador. I know some people might think that's ridiculous or that's silly, but you have to do this and this. You cannot. The executive branch of this country cannot simply ignore the judicial branch, no matter how annoying the judicial branch is. If we lived under Kalo versus New London for all these years, we could still find a way to live under these other judicial rulings. I've heard people saying, "Well, you need to put the judiciary in its place." No, that's not the. This isn't about one-upmanship or something like that. It's about following the Constitution and the law. Bring them back. Then send them back. I know that seems ridiculous, but maybe we can get a deal on miles or something like that. Or you know what? Bring him back with a Democratic congressman and then send at least Albrego back, and we'll see if any other congressmen want to keep going back down to El Salvador again. It's just a coincidence it's all happening around the time of spring break.
Yeah, probably not. Okay, well, if you're running a business, you know that every time you miss a call, you are actually leaving money on the table. And when every customer conversation matters, you need a phone system that keeps up and helps you stay connected. That's why you need OpenPhone.
OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system that streamlines and scales your customer communications. It works through an app on your phone or computer, so you no longer have to carry around 2 phones or use a landline. With OpenPhone, your team can share one number and collaborate on customer calls and texts like a shared inbox. That way, any teammate can pick up right where the last person left off, keeping response times faster than ever.
Plus, with AI-powered call transcripts and summaries, you'll be able to automate follow-ups, ensuring you'll never miss a customer interaction again. See why over 50,000 businesses trust OpenPhone to manage their businesses' calls and texts. OpenPhone is offering our listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/3ML. That's OPENPHONE.com/3ML. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. All All right, Jim, don't look now. It is still April 2025, but next year is the midterms, roughly a year and a half away, a little more than that. And, we talked briefly about the DNC picking their new officers, and one of the vice chairs is our old friend David Hogg, the former Parkland, Florida, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas student who was there during that horrific school shooting, turned himself very quickly into a gun control and then Democratic activist. And now they made him a vice chair to appeal to the young guys, because the young guys broke more for Trump than I think Democrats were expected. I'm not sure David Hogg's the right choice for that, but time will in fact tell. But the Democrats might now be regretting that decision, because David Hogg, in addition to being with the DNC, also still runs his own PAC. And the point of that PAC was to defeat Democratic incumbents. It's called the Leaders We Deserve group, and just causing all sorts of ruffles with Democratic leadership. Hakeem Jeffries, the House Democratic leader, saying, no, we need to stand by incumbent House Democrats. We can't be encouraging free-for-alls across the country, even in safe blue seats. So we'll see how this all plays out. Something tells me David Hogg might not be long for the DNC. But nonetheless, he also appeared with Major Garrett of CBS News and explained why just backing all the incumbents all the time isn't going to get the job done from his perspective.
For them, because we go out there as Democrats all the time and say democracy is the most important thing. We have to defend democracy. We fail to acknowledge that this generation, democracy is what put us through school shooter drills and school shootings. It's what's put us through the climate crisis and so much more. What we have to do is prove that democracy matters by standing up to the special interests that are killing the American dream and making our young people lose faith, not only in our party, but the future of this country. That is why we're doing.
Democracy caused school shootings, Jim. I assume what he means indirectly is that they couldn't get the gun control legislation through because they couldn't get the right people elected. But that is a real stretch, because, some people enjoy the Second Amendment and appreciate the Second Amendment, which they promise to uphold when they take their oath of office. But what do you make of the Democrats already infighting when Hogg's only been on the job a few weeks here?
Greg, I think you're giving him far too much credit. I interpreted Hogg's remarks to mean that democracy is the root of all of our problems. And that the effort here over at the DNC and with the new organization is to destroy democracy. And that once we get rid of it, all of these problems... Yeah. The other thing is, in light of Hogg's, short career, but very loud career as a gun control activist, it's dawned on me that all of my comments might be interpreted as insensitive, Greg. The last thing I want to do is be insensitive to the feelings of David Hogg. So if I say that he is taking aim at incumbents, is that bad?
Probably.
That he's gunning for them?
Yes.
That their inability to stand up to Trump has him triggered? Wants a candidate, that he's looking for candidates of higher caliber? Okay. All right, just checking. So, look, I could quote Donald Trump doing the parable of the scorpion and the frog, or I could do Taylor Swift. DNC, you knew he was trouble when he walked in. You knew that this kid was not going to come in and be a team player and make everything great. Like, what did you think he was going to do? He's going to come in and be, I have this great idea. No, he was a recognizable name. Nobody could name anybody else who was running for that other co-chair position. And I just suspect that the rest of the DNC said, let's go with this. Let's see. People know him. Maybe he'll bring in the money. Yes, he'll bring in the money to run against Democratic incumbents. This is the best news for the Republican National Committee in ages. And I'm sure they will be doing everything. They will be giving large contributions to this campaign to try to undermine Democratic incumbents. Look, midterms are a long ways away. Virginia and New Jersey gubernatorial elections are not that far away. New York City mayoral race, or various other little local races around the country. If you are a Republican, you're probably looking at, how can I help David Hogg? How can I make him a stronger influence in this? And how can I make life as hard as possible for vulnerable Democratic incumbents?
Yeah, exactly right. Because he's only going to push people who are even further to the left than whoever holds the job right now. But Jim, all this does is push what we've been talking about in the past, and that's that Democrats believe democracy's great when democracy produces the election results that they like. If democracy doesn't, see November 2024, then democracy is in grave danger. But the second that it goes their way, like the Wisconsin Supreme Court case, well, then democracy is just fine, and we need to celebrate that.
Yeah, democracy is endangered by elections. That's the takeaway from this. And that therefore we should try to avoid them whenever possible, which is why, foreshadowing perhaps something I'll have in one of my other publications I write for, I was just in Houston. Sylvester Turner passed away in first week of March. Governor Abbott took his sweet time announcing when they're going to have the special election. The special election is going to be in November. That district's not. And I'd be like, that's kind of bad. Because remember, Kathy Hochul was going to try to do the same thing for Stefanik's seat up in New York. Yeah. Also in Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer is not. There was a vacancy when a state senator got elected to the U.S. House of Representatives. Resigned her seat on January 3rd. All right, it's after Easter. Right, it's April 21st. Whitmer has not even announced when the election is going to be held. She did announce that there will be a special election. Oh, that's nice of her. Isn't it gracious of her to allow? Someday I'll allow people in the state senate district. Oh, by the way, the state senate is split like it was 1918. So the stakes of this is in order to deserve the Democratic majority in the state senate. I would say Gretchen Whitmer should not show her face in public, but judging by her Oval Office appearance, she doesn't want to do that anyway.
I was going to say, if you ask her the question, she's going to hold up her folder in front of her face.
You can't see me. I'm peekaboo. I don't like that. Reporters the question. Whoop, they're gone. They've disappeared.
That's the maturity you want that's the maturity you want in your possible 2028 Democratic nominee. I don't think any of that's going to help her cause. But nonetheless, Jim, great to have you back. We'll do it again tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Geraghty, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks for being with us today. Please be sure to subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch. If you don't already, tell your friends about us as well. We'd love to have them listening. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Geraghty. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a great Monday. Join us again Tuesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.